As Rangers fans, we know that a goaltender is the backbone of a hockey team. At Abundant Wealth Management, we are your financial backbone, offering financial planning, wealth management, tax planning, and estate planning services. To schedule your free consultation, head to www.abundant-wealth.com. That's www.abundant-wealth.com. Abundant Wealth Management. Live, plan, triumph.
You're listening to Rangers Radio, your home for end-to-end coverage of the New York Rangers. With your hosts, Brendan Azoff, Zach Domino, and Steve Pappas. Blue Shirts fans, the puck drops now.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Rangers Radio, and we are actually excited, dare I say actually excited, with the moves that happened on July 1st. There was a lot of question marks around what the Rangers were going to do, who was going to be dealt, and we got all our answers from Chris Drury on July 1st. So we're going to talk about who they signed, who they dealt, who's not returning, what draft picks they had. We're going to talk about what lines we will, want to see come season opener. So we got a ton to talk about on this episode. If you're joining us, we appreciate it. Hit the comments. We want to hear what your thoughts are as well. But it's just Steven and myself today. We're going to break all of that down and then some. But how's everything going? I know you had a nice round of golf before this.
Oh my God, it's been great. When you're playing good golf in your life, there's really nothing else that you need, and that's where I'm at the moment. If I could have done the podcast from the course today, I probably would have, but it wouldn't have made for good content. But I'm so pleasantly surprised with this week that I'm like trying to find something wrong with what happened on July 1st on Tuesday, but I got to be cautiously optimistic because we've seen this before. I don't think we've seen a free agent period for Drury as good as this one was. I think we've been left with some questions, left with some lingering issues on some July 1st. But I mean, am I wrong in saying that he fixed every need that was there? He addressed it. And, I think they got better. I think they're a better team today on July 3rd as they were on June 30th or June, whatever. Is it 30th? There's no 31st of June, right?
No 31st. Too much time on the course for you, my man. And to, you said anytime you're playing good golf, it's a good day. Well, I don't know that feeling yet. And hopefully one day I'll get to experience it. But you're right. They're definitely a better team now. And I think depending on how they decide to deploy Mika Zibanejad, I can say if they put him at 2 or 3C, that okay, they did fill the gaps in the roster. And the moves that they made are not going to jump off the page at you. It's no superstars, but I think we've on the show said repeatedly, it's not about that at this point. It's about getting good contracts, getting the right guys to fit the system that the new coach is going to be implementing in Mike Sullivan. And everything that I read led me to believe that Gavrikov was going to be $8.5-9 million. They get that at 7x7, which is awesome. They don't overpay for Taylor Radish or Will Cooley. They get some depth signings, guys, like Fix Wolanski, who they signed today or yesterday.
Okay, I saw him a lot because he played in Columbus, who's Cleveland's affiliate in the AHL. They were here in Rochester. They seem to be in Rochester every freaking Wednesday, which
the AHL does that. Yep.
So I saw this kid, Trey Fix-Wolanski, play maybe 7 or 8, maybe 10 times in the last 2 years for Cleveland. He's like, this is what I'm talking about when I say I'm so pleasantly surprised with what Drury addressed, because that's a guy where if somebody goes down in the regular season, that is a plug-and-play NHL guy. He's 5'6", maybe on a good day, so he's never going to, like, statistically or on the height and weight category step out on the page for you. But that's a pro's pro, and he's only 26, and he's had very good seasons for Cleveland, Columbus's AHL team. So that's a guy at the AHL level that is producing well. And there's another guy that we'll talk about when we get to the trade that was made this week about a guy who's been really good in the AHL and was really good in the AHL last season that the Rangers have acquired in Scott Morrow. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I was so that's when you talk about the deals that don't jump off the page for you. Trey Fix-Wolanski is a guy that 95% of, I'd say 97% of NHL fans have no idea. who he is, what he is. I only know because he's in Rochester or he's in Cleveland and they play Rochester a bunch and I see him all the time. He's a guy that impacts the game at the AHL level, and he might be like a Johnny Brodzinski type at the NHL level. He might be a younger Johnny Brodzinski. That's like the best comparison that I can give to you. And if that's all you get out of that guy, that is perfectly fine for what you're paying him and the role you're asking him to play.
Yeah, and you look at what they did, right? The depth signings, Justin Dowling, Derek Pouliot on defense, and Trey Fix-Wolansky. Well, those three guys are not going to be starting at the NHL level this year. But when you look at what happened last year, right? You got injuries on defense, you had injuries up front. You need guys that you could trust to come into the NHL lineup and try to, fill the void. And I think they did that, right? I mean, Justin Dowling's a fourth line guy. We saw Edstrom go down last year. That's somebody that could jump up and fill that spot. So can Fix-Wolansky. They have Brodzinski as the extra forward right now. So they're deeper than they were on June 30th. And I think that their depth is now not going to be as tested as we all thought it would be, because of the cap situation. They were able to move Chris Kreider's full contract. They were able to trade Keandre Miller, and I don't know how Keandre Miller is worth $500,000.
We'll get in there. We'll get into that in a second.
But that's something we're going to talk about. And before we dive into every single move and talk about the preceding moves that happened before July 1st and the players that they didn't get offers like Zach Jones, all of that, there was something that went through my head after July 1st. So yesterday morning, I woke up, I was looking at all the moves, and I was like, you know what? All this conversation has been about how can the Rangers get better for this season. And we've said on the show, well, it's not only just getting better for this season, but it's putting yourself in a position where come the 26 free agent class, we don't know who's going to be available at that point, but you could then improve your roster further with Panarin's contract off the books. They now have $32 million in projected cap space for the 2026 season. The only forward that's coming off the books is Panarin. So everybody else is solidified with the $32 million in cap space still to be had. Schneider is an RFA. Scott Morrow, newly acquired RFA. Soucy's a free agent. He's not coming back. And Jonathan Quick's a free agent, likely not coming back. So they really have the team intact that they need, plus $32 million in cap space to go out and potentially make a splash, on top of acquiring another first-round pick, which is top 10 protected. I think we all agree Carolina and Dallas are not finishing inside the top 10. So they're going to get a second first-round pick, which they could deploy as trade deadline bait and still have a first-round pick next year. They could deploy that based on the season and how it starts progressing, having 2 first-round picks and making that part of a trade to move up. You never know what's going to happen with that. And I think that Drury set himself up nicely for this season to give this team a chance with Mike Sullivan, but also for the future seasons to come. And that's something I did not anticipate saying on this show after the vibes that we had, 2 weeks ago when we last did an episode?
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, I think the vibe change, I don't know if it's a vibe change. I think I'm still, like I said, very cautiously optimistic about what this is. Yeah, and we can get into the Keandre Miller trade as well. We talk about the signings. I think Gavrikov, we saw. I didn't necessarily see a lot of like negative comments about Gavrikov, but I did see people talk about negative comments about Gavrikov signing with the Rangers. And I mean, how stupid? Come on, seriously. We have sat here at least for the last 3-4 years and said the Rangers lack defensive structure and they lack a guy who can seriously play defense at the National Hockey League level. And this is a guy who is one of the best, if not the best defensive defenseman, not only on the market, but in the league in general. Like Gavrikov he's like everything that you wanted Ryan Lindgren to be, right? Like he's not going to be a workhorse on offense, but boy, is he going to shut down the rush the other way, which is
35 points last year.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'll take 25 points if it means you negate 20 goals scored this year. I'd rather the 20 goals negated than the 20 goals scored. But he's literally what every Ranger fan has been clamoring for the last 3 to 4 years. And he's now on your team. Now, this gives Adam Fox a chance to really, I don't want to say sell out for offense, but it gives him a safety net to go out there and play his game as a puck moving defenseman that can jump in on the offense, because he knows he doesn't have a Jacob Trouba or a Ryan Lindgren or a Carson Soucy that's playing with him, that he needs to go back and bail out his mistakes. This is a home run signing for Chris Drury, and not only the guy, but also, I mean, I tweeted it out. I said, listen, this year's 9 is like last year's 8.5 or 8.2 or something like that. You got him for 7.
Yeah.
Like, you got him for 7 over 7 years. Like, it's fantastic. Like, some of the deals that you saw signed this week, ungodly horrendous. Like Provorov or Romanov, like those defensemen making like $6 to $8 million, $8.5 million, and you've got one of the best defensemen in the league at 7. That is, I mean, that's perfect.
Aaron Ekblad signed for $900,000 less in Florida, and I know he took a team-friendly discount for that deal too. So and like you said, Gavrikov is one of the best defensive defensemen in the league, and he's not coming into a system that they had last year. It's man-to-man. His foot speed's going to be tested. He's coming into a Mike Sullivan structured system, which I think will benefit him. And that's the move that they needed to make all along. They got the number 1 defenseman on the market, and I think that can make the Rangers, breathe a little bit easier at night too. And when you think about Adam Fox, right, I think he's one of the most intelligent players in the game already. And having the mental capacity to do what he does with the partners that he's had over the course of the last 3-4 seasons, it's going to free him up tremendously. And this is not going to be a free up where he's just never going to get back. He's too smart of a hockey player to do that. But he's not going to be the number 1 shutdown defenseman and the number 1 offensive defenseman on the team. He can, pick his spots a little bit more freely. He can worry less about being the first guy back on the puck when it gets dumped in. Gavrikov's a big dude, right? Ryan Lindgren tried to play that game and be that support system for Fox. He just wasn't cut out for it size-wise. And that guy has a ton of heart. You won't hear me talk badly about Ryan Lindgren's effort and compete level. But Gavrikov can take a hit a little bit better than Lindgren can. And I think that it's going to free him up to, create more offense with the outlet pass, to jump in a little bit more. And he doesn't even jump in as much as just read the play at the blue line. But if he could stay home a second longer and, maybe intercept some pucks and turn it the other way, they're going to get the offense that they've seen. Because even last year, in what you might call a down year for Fox, he still was close to a point per game defenseman. He battled injuries. This dude is so good. And I saw so many tweets at the end of last season, like, oh, you got to move Fox. That's the guy. Come on, man.
Stupid.
Come on. No. And watch what happens this year with Gavrikov. He's now one of the most underrated players in hockey.
Adam Fox got Keandre Miller and Ryan Lindgren paid this offseason. I mean, not Miller. Lindgren's making what, 4.5 in Seattle, and Miller's making what, 8 by 60 or 60 million over 8 years
per year. Yep.
7.5. Like, you got arguably the better defenseman, granted older, at $500,000 less.
Yeah,
in Gavrikov than you did for Keandre Miller. And we'll go into the Keandre Miller trade right now. I think it's a great segue.
Yeah.
Miller traded to Carolina. I'm doing this off the top of my head, so tell me if I get it wrong. For a first, a second this year, conditional first, second, and Scott Morrow, one of Dallas or Carolina's picks, and top 10 protected, and it's the earlier of the picks, correct? Like
so it's top 10 protected, but it's the better of Carolina or Dallas's first rounder. If for some reason it's in the top 10, it gets pushed to 2027. But
which
I get a
first
round pick out of it.
I cannot believe I'm saying this in the big 2025, but the Rangers have draft capital to work with this year.
A lot of it now.
And they have a lot of it. And if they are a good team, and it's, again, straining the word if on this one, but if they are a good team next year and contend and sit here and, Zibanejad's got a good year, Trocheck has a bounce back year, Panarin does Panarin things, Fox is better offensively with Gavrikov, Lafreniere has a bounce back, Trocheck, I don't know if I said him already, but if you're sitting here in, we're looking ahead, but January, February, and you're, first, second, or third in the division, which there's a lot of ways this season can go. They could be a top 3 team in the division. They could be 6th or 7th. Like, there are so many ways this season can go. I don't really think, and I made a joke about it to a couple friends this week, that like, it's either going to be they're going to be really good or they're going to be really bad, and there's nowhere near that 500 like average realm that they're going to sit in. It's either going to be great or catastrophic. But if you're sitting here in that good realm of first, second, and third in the division, you have a first-round pick that you can deal for somebody that will be available at the deadline and still be able to have your first-round pick. Or if you want to make yet another deal, if you really believe this team is a Stanley Cup contender come January and February, which in July, no. But if they show it this year, if they come out, they play hard, they play well, they play as a team, and they show that they can compete for a Stanley Cup this year, you have 2 first-round picks. You can make a big splash possibly twice.
Yeah.
And you have, it's like the world is at your fingertips. And on the flip side of that, if you're bad and if you're a bottom feeder team, you have a top 10 pick possibly, plus a second, another pick in the first round. If you really want to get squirrely, come that, like say you're bad enough but not 1-1 bad. If you want to go, if you want to trade the 7th pick and a later first round pick to move up in the draft, then you've got that. So there's just so much flexibility that you have this coming off season and this season in general with this pick, and it's fantastic. Like Keandre Miller, I have been on this show and I have been on Twitter and I've defended Keandre Miller, and I also want to just say I had a tweet, like literally they signed Gavrikov and then like 5 minutes later traded Keandre Miller to Carolina.
Yep.
I was like, great, it ruined my day. It wasn't the fact that they traded Miller. Like I knew they were going to trade Miller, especially after that. That was a no-brainer, but like trading him to Carolina, I did not love that fact.
And at that point too, by the way, I want it to be known that we had no idea what the return was either.
Yeah.
It was
no
just
clue
traded
that,
to Carolina, nothing else, no context.
Yeah. No clue that it was a first, a second, and Scott Morrow. I am wholeheartedly like, I saw guys that are, impartial, like I think an Islander fan who hates both teams were like, they gave him Scott Morrow. Like, that's crazy. Yeah. I mean,
and, I think that I said it on the last pod that we did too, where I said, because this is when they started talking about potentially moving Schneider over, or, if you wind up moving Miller, but signing Gavrikov and you have Susi and Vakanainen, and you move Schneider to the left side to replace one of those guys, who becomes that third right D, right? That's one of the big things. And they answered that question in the trade. And I think that right now you're sitting in a position where I know moving to your offside sounds easy, but it's a little bit more difficult when you're playing at the NHL level. But if Schneider feels comfortable enough to do it and they're willing to try that out early in the year, well, now you have your right side solidified with Scott Morrow. Give this kid a chance to be an everyday NHL player. You have your top 4 solidified now with Schneider, Borgen, Fox, and Gavrikov. And then you could rotate Susi and Vakanainen on the left side, and it gets a little bit more upbeat from the defensive side, where you're not rolling out Susi and Vakanainen 2 out of every 3 shifts. So I definitely like that move a lot. And yeah, I watched Scott Morrow play in that Eastern Conference, series against the Florida Panthers. And that's a young kid who played 14 regular season games, I think it was, for Carolina, stepping in after not playing in the first 2 rounds. And all of a sudden, this guy is going against what we know is a juggernaut of a Florida Panthers team. And he did not look like he was out of place, right? He didn't have the best of series. He didn't jump off the page, but he wasn't out of place. And if you could put that type of experience now into next season and give him an everyday role, well, you might have just gotten a trade that you could live with for Keandre Miller, because we know that there is untapped potential with Keandre Miller that Carolina is going to get out of him. That's what Carolina does. I do not think he's a $7.5 million a year defenseman. Rising cap, it could be an exception. But if Scott Morrow pans out, if the first round pick that they got and the second round pick are used properly, and not, a 500 Rangers team trading a first round pick at the deadline for somebody to try and swing for the fences, but used as a trade chip if it's a good team, or actually used to draft a good prospect, I think they win this trade. And I could live with that. Whereas if you asked me that same question a month and a half ago, I said trading Keandre Miller is probably a mistake because I don't know what you're going to get. You have no leverage. But they found a way. I mean, I don't know how on July 1st, when teams could have offer sheeted, they found a way to get that return. So kudos to them.
Yeah. And again, for those that are kind of sitting there and be like, well, why didn't, I mean, the whole report that came out is Carolina was going to offer sheet Keandre Miller and pay him this contract. Why they didn't do that was because they didn't have a 3rd round pick. And part of that compensation is if they offer sheeted Miller and the Rangers didn't match that, which they were not going to do that for 8 years, the Hurricanes would have needed to give the Rangers a first, second, and third this year. Carolina did not have that third, so that's why you get Scott Morrow. Like that, they gave them a offer sheet comparison return in the first and second, didn't have the third, and they threw in a 22-year-old right shot puck moving defenseman, which
They essentially threw in another first round pick.
It's basically 2 firsts and a second. And he was a second round pick. I'll give him that. He was a second round pick, but he is shown out at the AHL level. We'll see what he can do full time at the NHL level. And, if you play him with Braden Schneider next year, which is where I would 100%, advocate he play with on that third pairing. And I think you're going to get stuck with Soucy and Borgen on the second pairing. At least as it sits right now. I don't know if they're going to trade. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, they can trade that first round pick still this offseason if there's a defenseman out there, but
True.
It'll be hard. It would be very difficult because of the cap situation that they're in right now. But I am so pleasantly surprised with the moves that were made, the signings, and the trade by Chris Drury. And I'm still skeptical, right? Like, I'm not going to completely flip my tune here on Chris Drury. They obviously still have to work out. Like, I think the biggest thing that we've sat here and said about Drury is he's never afraid to make the move, but the return is never there. Like, the return on that move is never there. And on paper, they got the return for Keandre Miller. They got the return in signing Gavrikov for less than market value. They got the return even for Taylor Radish. Like, Taylor Radish had a really good year for Washington this year. And he's going to be a very good two-way player. What did he have, like 35, 40 points, something like that with Washington?
The points could come, but when you look at the Rangers lineup, to me, him on the third line actually solidifies that line. And the bottom six, I know that I saw some people are like, oh, the Rangers' bottom six is trash. If you put Radish on the bottom six, if Mika Zibanejad winds up being the center on the third line, let's say, and then you have, either a Berard, an Othman, a Parson, and whoever winds up being that left wing. We've talked about it at length. The fourth line, when they were all healthy, was arguably the Rangers' best line during that stretch of the season where they really weren't doing much. Sam Carrick, Matt Rempe, and Adam Enstrom together were very productive at keeping the puck in the offensive zone. And I really think that bottom six now, with the addition of Radish, becomes one that's not only a little bit more defensively responsible because of Radish, but also becomes one that can keep the puck in the offensive zone. They might not give you a ton of goals and points, even though the fourth line did have a couple of games where they were scoring. But I think it's a sneaky good bottom six that people are not giving the Rangers credit for. Now, granted, they're going to have to replicate that. Edstrom hasn't played a game in how many months? Like, this is going to take some time, but I don't think it's as bad as people think. And they're just a switch flip away from some of the guys that we've seen production from before, that the team could be good, which is why I don't think either one of us are saying, oh yeah, this day that Drury had on July 1st is going to put the Rangers back in contention. But it's also not having us say that they're going to be as bad as I thought they might be potentially this season. And I think that that's a win based on the situation they were in prior.
I don't think it's crazy to sit here and think that they can make the playoffs next year. I've said wild card to third in the Metro. Like, you look at the Metro at the moment, right? Like, the Islanders are going to be good. They might not be good this year. They might not, they might improve, but they might still not be a playoff team this year. They're going to be good in the future. They've had, probably one of the better off seasons, if not the best off season out of any team. But Columbus is making a return, I'd like to say. I think Columbus is going to be good. Don't know if they have the skill to be a top 3 team in the division. The Islanders not skilled enough to be in the top 3 in the division. The Devils are going to be better. I think they're going to sit at 2. Carolina's again going to sit at 1. I wouldn't be surprised if Washington regressed. They could be sitting there at 3 or a wild card. Penguins are going to suck. Philly's going to suck, but suck and be fun, I think. I think the Flyers are going to be a fun team to watch this year, almost in the sense that, like, last year, the Blue Jackets were a bad team, but, like, were fun to watch.
Yeah.
I think Philadelphia this year is going to finally, and I'll say this as like a hockey fan, not as much as a Ranger fan, hockey's better with Philly being good. or at least enjoyable to watch. And you're going to talk about possibly a line of Zegras, Michkov, and Konechny. Like, that's just going to be such a fun line to watch sometimes. And hopefully, for Zegras' sake, a change of scenery is good. I mean, it's going to be tough going to a market that actually gives a shit about your players and is going to be, very upset when they're not playing well. But I think the Rangers have a legit opportunity to sit here and contend for the third spot in the division, or contend for a wild card spot. Obviously, you don't know what's going to happen in the Atlantic, so you don't know if they maybe, between Toronto and who obviously lost Marner, Toronto and Florida and Tampa, and who knows about Boston. I know Boston fans are pissed about how their July 1st went.
They didn't really do anything. I mean,
no,
they
really
made some small moves that I think make them a little bit better than what they would have been, on paper prior to that. But
Detroit, or I don't even want to say Buffalo. I said last year I think they can make the playoffs, and I still think that they have an opportunity.
I think Washington takes a step back. Washington reminds me of the Rangers from not last season, but the season prior, when they had this crazy year. They went on a run to the Eastern Conference Final, and I know Washington didn't do that, but Washington, nobody expected them to have that run and have that year that they had in the regular season. Ovechkin now broke that milestone. That I think that was a huge rallying point, and that team overperformed. And I don't think they're going to be bad. I think that's a playoff team still, but I don't think they're going to be at that pace and setting the pace like they did all season in the Metro. It's a little bit more competitive this year, but it's also more open in terms of, when you look at years past, it was either Carolina, the Devils, the Rangers, Washington were the four teams that you knew were going to be vying for the top three. The Islanders always found a way to get into that wild card and jump one of them at the end. I think it's a little bit more open with Columbus, with Philly now being a little bit better. Pittsburgh's just a dumpster fire, but there's nothing that, stands out to me as the Rangers aren't going to make the playoffs. I think they will. I think that last year was just a complete domino effect of bad things, that this year's not going to be that. And I can't imagine everyone that regressed at the same time last year because of what was going on around the locker room and around the team and the outside, not only on the ice, is going to do that again this year. So, Radish he ranked 8th on the Capitals last year at 5-on-5 Corsi and expected goals for on that Washington Capitals team. That was really good. You put him on a line with, either a Trocheck or Mika as the center, and maybe a young Berard who's a firecracker in and of himself on the left side. That's a good third line. And, we're going to talk about, probably in about 10 minutes, what our line combinations would be next year. That to me, that's the line on paper that I like the most.
Yeah, I think it's without it. You could friggin' crown the Canes as the division champs this year. They go out and sign Ehlers today. I think that's about as locked in as you can have. And, I sit here and watch the Devils, right? And I hate the Devils. Like, it's who I am. I cannot stand them. I can't stand their fans. They have like a legit issue with injuries. Like, that's what it is. Like, you watch it enough, it's like, oh yeah, it's unlucky. Jack Hughes got injured, Jesper Bratt got injured, and they were out a long term. But then you realize it's happened basically every year, except for the year that they have had their best season in 15 years and won one playoff round. Correct me if I'm wrong.
They beat the Rangers.
Won a singular playoff round. I knew that. I just wanted to make sure.
And then got swept by Carolina.
Yeah. No, it was a 5. I think it was 5. I think they got
because I thought that was the year where Carolina swept them and then got swept in the conference final. It was like back-to-back sweeps in the second and third round.
You might be right.
Somebody could fact check me if they're looking in the comments, but I'm pretty sure they got swept by Carolina and then Carolina got swept by Florida. Because I know Florida swept Carolina that year. That's when Kachuk scored.
No, that was
seconds left.
Oh, Jesus, no. What was that? I'm trying to think of what it was.
That was the year that they lost to Vegas.
I thought they won at least one game in that series. I thought they maybe got game 2 at home, because I think they were no. I don't even know. I don't know. But I remember the Devils winning a game. I thought the Devils won a game in that series. We'll do our quick fact check on that one. But the Devils could be injured. Like there is so many different options that can happen this year. And, the Devils go out and get, what's his name? They go out and get Dadonov today. And I'm trying to remember who's the other guy that they had gotten at the deadline. Or at the
Devils
deadline.
got one game. And
they got one game.
Swept Carolina.
Who was the other guy that the Devils went out and got? I guess Connor Brown. Like, did they have like a good deadline or a good free agency? Like Connor Brown and Evgeny Dadonov, is that like good?
I mean, I like the Dadonov move. I think he replaces Tatar, but the Devils, like you said, and it's not a knock on the Devils. I think we need to make sure that if there's any Devils fans listening, we're not knocking them. But Dougie Hamilton, who's probably their number one defenseman, and Jack Hughes, who's their number one forward, have missed significant chunks of the last 2 seasons. Those are legitimate, concerns when you're looking at a Devils roster. So to me, their management is banking on that not happening 3 times in a row. And it's a risky gamble, but if it does pay off, we've seen how good they could be offensively and defensively. And now you have Markstrom in goal. So if everybody's healthy for a full year, yeah, it's a good team. You're never going to sell me on Carolina. I'm sorry, you're just not. They lost Burns, they lost Orlov. To me, that team doesn't have the goaltending to get them through a long playoff run. And the Rangers, if the Rangers can play a much better defensive system under Sullivan with, more defensively responsible people, especially with the addition of Gavrikov, Shesterkin's going to have a monster year. And I think people, have talked more about the contract than the goalie himself. That's a good goalie. If you watch the postseason and saw what Edmonton had in it, and you did that last year as well, it's the same thing that we talked about with Lundqvist. If those teams that were on the fringe of being really good Stanley Cup champions had Lundqvist or Shesterkin, like if you're Edmonton, would you trade Leon Draisaitl for Igor Shesterkin? Like trade off. I'm not saying straight up 1-for-1, but if you can dump Draisaitl and keep McDavid, but have Shesterkin in net instead of Skinner.
I think you could easily, that'd be a 1-for-1 trade. That is a 1-for-1 trade that could happen. Not could. No, I don't want to say could happen, but I mean like a 1-for-1 trade that if like Edmonton, I mean, it won't because he's in year 1 of a whatever deal, but let's just say in this hypothetical world that Edmonton offered Draisaitl for Shesterkin 1-for-1. I don't think either team would be upset that the deal is made. I could be wrong.
It helps both teams with needs, right? The Rangers need center and Edmonton needs a goaltending really bad.
The question gets begged: Are the Rangers going to need a goaltender at some point? But that's beside.
I mean, you let Benoit Lair come out of retirement and work with Dylan Garand for 5 minutes, and all of a sudden that guy's going to be the next number 1 goalie. But I think it's worth noting that I know they didn't get much, right? They got Carey Terrance and the 3rd-round pick, but they traded Chris Kreider's full salary. That allowed them essentially to replace $6.5 million with the $7 million Gavrikov. So to me, that's a win. They were able to draft Malcolm Spence in the 2nd round. They extended Edstrom. They extended Matthew Robertson for depth. They extended Matt Rempe. They had extended Parson a while back. They let Zach Jones go to Buffalo. They let Abe Kubel go, Kaliev go, Alex Belzile. All those guys are gone. But I think ultimately the depth and the actual on-ice team that we could expect is going to be better next season. So no matter how you slice it, that's a win for Chris Drury on July 1st. And if you want to talk about it, and I know we both have it up there, you want to go through what your ideal line combinations would be at the start of next season?
I accidentally just refreshed my page, so give me 2 seconds to remake it, and I'll
start with it.
Yeah,
I'll start while you're doing that. All right. Well, now mine's refreshing too. What a disaster! All right.
I got the Mac, and it's got like that. Like if you swipe right on with the 2 fingers, it just completely refreshes, and I unfortunately did that.
Yeah, no, I switched over to Windows, and I'm having all sorts of stuff now. All right. Well, I know I kept the Panarin, Trocheck, and Loughlin the same because I just have a hard time breaking them up with a new coaching staff, even though ideally it would be broken up. I believe my second line was JT Miller in the middle, Will Cooley on the left, and I had Perreault on the right. Then I had Berard with Zibanejad and Radish, and then Rempe, Edstrom, and Carrick was the 4th line. So that's my forward group.
Okay. I went a different route, and I broke up that top line. You're not going to like it, but I have moved up Mika Zibanejad to 1C, and I'll explain why in a second. It'll be Panarin, Zibanejad, Lafreniere. Second line, I've got Cooley, JT Miller, and Gabe Perreault. I didn't really see a second line right wing on this roster at the moment. So Gabe
Perreault up there.
Yep. Gabe Perreault gets the call up to second line right wing to play with Cooley and Miller. And I think that is a decent enough line. And I think it's a good line to have a guy like Perreault start his real NHL career with. This is why I moved Trocheck and I split them up. And we sort of talked about it in a group text. Berard, Trocheck, Taylor Radish is a third line that not a lot of people want to play against. And what made the Rangers so good in 2023 or 2024, the 23-24 season was they had, a seemingly a nonstop motor, right? Like they had guys that just would go. And as soon as they brought up Rempe, that fourth line was always go. And it was just a pain in the ass to play against. Brett Berard is a pain to play against. Trocheck, when he's at his best, is a piece of shit. And I mean that in an endearing way. Like he is just, he's going to chirp you. Like he's going to go in, make plays. He's going to win faceoffs. And Taylor Radish is the same way. Like that's what he's built to do. And that's what he's been brought here to do, is be a pest on the third line. And your fourth line is obviously Edstrom, Carrick, and Rempe. And that's, you could pencil that in. You put that in pen as long as nobody's hurt. That's what your fourth line is going to be.
Yeah, and I agree with you with the third line. Like in my ideal world, that would be the third line. I just have a very hard time trusting the defensive side of the puck if you put Panarin, Zibanejad, and Loft together. And I also think that
here's the thing, though. I will say this. I don't mean to cut you off, but at his, I don't even want to say at his best, but when Mika's going good, he's a good defensive center. Like he plays penalty kill. Like he knows how to play defense as a forward. So yeah, last year wasn't great. If you're able to get back to like a above average to average Mika, and keep in mind, by the way, he was a point per game player when JT Miller came to the team. So he ended the season pretty well. But if you get an average to above average Mika, he's a good defender.
Yeah, and that actually leads me to what I was going to say next, because in my mind, it's almost beneficial to let him play a third line role, not necessarily go against the top competition every single game and have that mental stress, because to me, it's all mental for him. I don't think he's lost every single ounce of talent that he's had over the last 2 seasons, because that's unrealistic. He's still a really good player. Like you said, almost a point per game at the end of last season. If you put him in that third line role with 2 guys on the side of him, in Radish and Berard, who are going to almost force him into the forecheck and force him to kind of play with that motor, and he's not going against the number 1 center of the other team, I kind of like that at the beginning of the season. And if he starts to play well and the Trocheck, Panarin, Loft line isn't doing what they did 2 years ago, then by all means bump him up. But I think at the start of the year, putting him next to 2 guys that are going to kind of force him into the fight a little bit, the same thing that kind of happened with JT Miller, where JT Miller got to the team, they put Zibanejad with him, and he kind of was dragging Mika into the fight and got him back on track. I think that Berard and Radish have a similar effect, and I kind of like the idea of giving him not necessarily a sheltered role, but a little bit lesser of a role to get his confidence back. I mean, I don't think Sullivan's flying to Sweden to talk to him if they don't think that right now the issue is a lack of confidence as opposed to a lack of talent. And I think if you can give him a situation where he can thrive, and I'm not talking about playing him 14 minutes a night, because he's still going to be on the power play. He's still going to get his ice time. But if you could put him 5-5 in situations where he's not going against the McDavids, the Eichels, the number 1 matchups that he's had since he's been a Ranger, that might be beneficial for him and thus the team in the long term. So that's kind of why I kept that top line intact the way it was.
So let's go defense now. What do you got for the defense?
So defense, this was a very good feeling, penciling Gavrikov next to Fox and actually giving Adam Fox a good defensive partner on the left side for arguably the first time in his career. I know Lindgren and him had a couple of good years early on, but this is going to be a much different top pair than we've seen in New York in a long time. Then I have Schneider playing, like you said, next to Scott Morrow, and Borgen playing next to Carson Soucy. The only reason I did that was because Susie and Borgen played together in Seattle for a little bit when they had brief stops there. And I think that might be a comfort level that actually helps Susie's game. But I have no problem replacing Schneider and Susie, swapping them, and then taking out Susie to put Vakanainen in with Morrow. I think they now have options, which is something they didn't have, 2 days ago, 3 days ago. But that's the 6 that I'm rolling with.
Yeah, I think we've got the same 6. I think it's just I've got Schneider and Morrow as the third pair. And it just depends on how everything goes this year. I wouldn't mind Susie and Borgen be a third pair, but I think it's very hard to throw out a 20. And granted, like Schneider's 23, like he plays a lot older. He's been around longer than a 23-year-old defenseman usually is. But if you have a defensive pairing of a 23 and a 22-year-old, like sometimes you got to shelter the minutes.
Well, to be honest, with Gavrikov's addition, that first pair could wind up playing 26 minutes a night, and then you could just split the remaining 34 amongst those two guys and maybe give a slight edge in ice time, depending on the situations, to Susie and Borgen. But I don't really think, years past, there's been a huge disparity in terms of the top four's minutes and the third pair's minutes. I think that, you kind of have a 2B, 2C, I'll say, because I don't think either one of those pairs is really a 2A. But it's interesting. I mean, I'm not sold on the defense purely for the fact that Will Borgen hasn't been here long enough. Like, if I was the GM, he wouldn't have gotten the contract when he got it. And I think he had some really good moments for the Rangers when he came over. I think that he is a pretty solid right defenseman. Do I think that he kind of got caught up in everything else that was going on towards the end of last season? A little bit, but it's very hard to be a good shutdown defenseman when you have a guy on your left side that can cough the puck over at the rate Susie did. And I've looked at charts. I've looked at other things. Last year was an exceptionally bad year for Carson Susie overall with Vancouver and the Rangers. Previous years, he's been, middle of the pack, but he hasn't been that bad. If he could return to middle of the pack, then yes, I like that second pair a lot more.
Interesting. You want to go goaltending?
I think goaltending is the one position nobody has a question about.
No, not even slightly. Yeah, I think listen, this is a team that I've said that could be, in that third spot or in that second spot if things all go well, or they could be at the bottom of the barrel. So
the interesting thing, both of us have Brennan Othmann starting in the minors.
Correct. It was a debate between Berard and Othmann to play that third line wingers position. Brett Berard has been able to produce since he's been up here. Brennan Othmann has not. Brennan Othmann he plays a great game. He plays a hard game, but for some reason he has not been able to produce points when he's up at the NHL level, and Brett Berard has. So that's the deciding factor, at least for me, in putting Berard on that third line as opposed to Brennan Othmann.
I'm the same way, and there comes a point in time, and we've talked about this with Kakko, with Yedel, with Lafreniere. You have to produce, right? And I think when Brett Berard was drafted in the 5th round, everybody knew he was that feisty player, undersized, but nobody knew when he came to the NHL level what he could do. And so far at the NHL level, he has had more impactful games than Brennan Othmann has. And I've said this maybe since 2 years ago, that if I were the Rangers, when they were in this cup contention window, I would have moved Othmann for a piece that another team might look at Othmann and go, okay, we can get something out of this kid. Now you're in a situation where his value is probably not where it was when he was first drafted, and people were just kind of looking at him as a prospect. People have seen him at the NHL level. He's had some good games. I think he's been snake bitten, especially last year. I think he deserves at least 2 to 3 goals in the chances he's gotten, but got to be able to finish. And he's been a power play guy in the AHL as well. There's really no power play spot for him that he's going to get consistent power play minutes on. I'd rather have the guy in Berard that's proven 5-on-5. He's impactful. And especially on that third line, if you have him and Radish as the wings, that's going to be another line that's just tough to play against.
Yep. Something to note as well, Zach Jones gone, signed with Buffalo. Interesting career that he had with the Rangers.
That's a good word.
Never really got a chance, but also when he did get the chance, it was good, sometimes bad, sometimes catastrophic, and it was way too much of an in-between. And
that's on the Rangers in my mind, though. That guy should have been given consistent minutes. And listen, I said what I said on Twitter, right, or X, and people are, oh, well, Zach Jones isn't good. Rangers fans think he's good. He's not good. Me saying that they mishandled that situation is not me saying that Zach Jones is going to be Brian Leetch, right? If you're telling me that Zach Jones would have been worse in a consistent minute spot in the NHL than Carson Soucy was with the Rangers, I think you're crazy. And you didn't have to trade a third-round pick to get Carson Soucy if you were just willing to give Zach Jones time to see what he had. I think there were 7 to 10 game stretches where he played really well, and then out of nowhere he was scratched, and then when he got inserted back, it was bad. And that, to me, if you can't let a kid develop any consistency, and remember, he wasn't sent down, he was just sitting, right? If you sent him down, let him play in the AHL, that's one thing. Then he'll come back up and you could have game shape. He's just sitting there watching, and that wasn't the case just last year. That was the year before that. And ever since he really got called up, he was just in that no man's land of the Rangers system. So good on him going to Buffalo. We'll see if he gets any ice time there. But yeah, that was a weird Rangers tenure from all parties involved.
Yep. And might as well mention the draft as well. That happened in between our last episodes. Malcolm Spence at 43. Consensus seemed like a very good value pick. And they went 5 defensemen, 3 forwards, and a couple of those guys are, big shithouse defensemen that sort of like a Gavrikov type, not necessarily going to produce much offense, but the Rangers said they weren't drafting out of need necessarily when they took 5 defensemen, but it was just who they thought were the best available at that time. So decent enough draft, not nothing, he didn't have a first round pick. And at the time he didn't trade Miller. You were like, shit, nothing's coming of this. And here we are on July 1st, and they've completely sort of revamped at least the decor kind of, but also actually not kind of, they definitely revamped the decor. But also, got some good pieces at the forward position.
And most importantly is that they restocked their cupboard, like you said. I mean, they got 2 firsts now in 26. They got a second, which they hadn't had previously before that Miller trade. They still have their 3rd, 5th, 6th, and they have Vancouver 7th. So they're coming now from a position of strength in terms of the deadline, right? If you looked at what they had available draft pick wise on June 30th, not last anything, just 5 days ago, and then you look at what they have now. Well, if this team is in the 2nd or 3rd spot come the trade deadline, they actually have chips to play with. They were looking at 1 first round, no 2nd round, no 4th round. It's really hard to start making draft pick trades, and you usually have to include prospects, which they don't have a deep prospect pool as it was. So Chris Drury has done well. I'm coming at this from the belief that you have your team. Let's keep it that team. Deadline, you can maybe add a small piece here or there, see how, what happens with injuries, how things shake out. But to me, you let Sullivan do his job with this group. And 2026, when you have $32 million in cap space and have decisions to make around Panarin and the free agent market, to me, that's when you start going back all in, because you have Shesterkin under contract for 8 more years after this, 7 more years after this season. Panarin's off the books. Lafreniere's long term. You still have JT Miller and Zibanejad for another 4 years. You got Trocheck signed. You have Adam Fox and Gavrikov signed. You have the pieces there, and it's up to Drury now to put the rest of it together. I think he did a good job this year with what space he had, but $32 million in cap space is a lot. Even with the rising cap situation, he can get a good group of players around those guys, and that, to me, that's the golden time. Right. This is anything that happens this year that's playoff bound, conference final, whatever it might be. That's icing on the top of the cake. I think next year is really what he's building for. And the moves that he made this July 1st kind of lead me to believe that's how he's thinking too.
Should be interesting. I'm very much, this is like purgatory. Like we're just getting ready to see what happens in 2 years.
I mean, that's it. The one thing I'll say about the Rangers, they don't rebuild, right? I know they put out a letter that wasn't a rebuild. They're going to be in the mix of something every year, and at least it's exciting from a fan standpoint. I think that I hate it every so often because I'm like, can you just tear it all down and try to do it the right way like you see all these good teams do? But this is New York, and that just doesn't happen here. That's part of the reason why there hasn't been a championship in 500 years. But unfortunately, this is what we got, and I think that from the standpoint of number 1 free agent defenseman is now on the team. Best partner Adam Fox has had in his time here. You have a solid bottom 6 ad in Radish. You solidified your lineup up front. You re-signed Cooley got him on a $3.9 million contract, which I don't think anybody was expecting to really be below 4 with the chatter that we saw. So you have 2 years now where your team is intact. Like, they don't have to worry about people reaching RFA status again, UFA status until 27. We'll see what he does, man. But the fact that I'm going to say he actually had a good day pisses me off because I want him gone.
A little bit.
But he did have a good day.
I got this sneaking suspicion that he's going to end up in Buffalo if shit doesn't go well.
I have the sneaking suspicion he's going to find a way to really put a wrench into our positive vibes before it's all said and done.
Oh yeah, I'm good. I've got everything off my chest, by the way, so we're
yeah.
all good.
I'm all set too. I mean, I don't know when I'm going to be back. I think I'm pretty much done for July, but hopefully everybody's done for July, so we can just take a breather and enjoy some summer weather.
Yes, sir.
All right. Happy 4th, man. Happy 4th to
course.
the 200 people that are listening. Have a good 4th weekend. Hopefully everybody's off and enjoying the sun tomorrow. And see you when we see you.
I got to work tomorrow. I got to work tomorrow.
Night or during the day?
At night.
No, it's a few day beers.
Yeah. That'd be a great newscast.
It'll be fun. If I see you on my TikTok as a blooper, I think you had a good 4th.
Yeah, so we'll see about that. But all right, boys. Thanks for listening.
See ya.
See you guys.